broadcast this event, but anyway, we shall record it and then we shall broadcast it. So today it will be a discussion. The Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, Oleksiy Danilov, will give his speech, and you can ask him your questions. You should not wait for until he finishes his speech. You can just give me a sign, and I shall find the way how we can ask questions to Mr. Danilov. So this is the event organized in the scope of the project of the National Platform for Resilience and Social Cohesion. So there will be one of the co-founders, Volodymyr Lupatsiy, who will give us an introductory speech to this event. Thank you very much for giving me the floor. On behalf of the National Platform, I would like to tell you a few words that the National Platform for Resilience and Social Cohesion is a consortium of think tanks and experts, and our priority is to promote strategic resilience approach, which is a forward one for the EU countries and NATO countries. So we need not only resilience, but also creating an ecosystem of resilience. So we should assess risks and opportunities, and we should have system for this without reassessing the global context every time, which is very dynamic. So we need to understand and to see the future in the long-term perspective. How can we ensure social resilience and resilience of our state? So you are welcome for discussion. This is the main risk when you give when to stop, but anyway, your mic, this person wants to take with him. You know very good this personality. This is Mr. Oleksiy Danilov, and not always we have this chance to listen to a so respectful speaker, but today we cannot have questions from online here, listeners, unfortunately. Thank you very much for the organizers for that they invited me. We are always glad to take part in this kind of events, because it is very important for us to have a platform for voicing out our opinions on the global processes in the world. I shall be speaking to the topic every 10 to 15 years, every country makes some focus how the world will be developing, how it will look like in 10 or 15 years, and then this focus come true or not. But every country, every government works for forecasting the future. The same as with our country, we are looking in detail into the trends, into the global trends, by information which is in public space or private information, so proprietary information. And we have provided to our President and Cabinet of Ministers the global trends until 2040. how the world will look like based on the documents which we have analyzed in our analysis. We have 14 documents. You can see them on the screen. They are the data of the US and the Ministry of Defense of the United Kingdom. We have been looking through them thoroughly, and then we found the 7 main issues which we can use in order to understand how the world will develop. So the first is demography and human development. Is there a place for our country in this world? How the world will be developing? How will it be moving? We are not on some separate globe. All processes in the world, they are reflected on us, so we can see that until 2040 we will see the growth in population and the growth in the age of population, and there are other indicators. One of them for our country is 67%. 85% of the population of the planet will be living in the urban area. So how the population will be growing? We can see the slowdown of China demography thanks to their one family, one child policy. There will be demographic problems in India, but it will be a little bit slower. But in the geometric progression, the population will be growing. Now the indicator of education and birth rate. The more educated people are, the less birth rate is. The demographic crisis in Europe is obvious. Unfortunately, the war we experience at our territory, first in Poland, in Germany, they will use this chance to leave Ukrainians with their children, those who are most possible potentially to work in Germany and Poland. So we expect a real struggle for our people. So we must create very good conditions for people in Ukraine. Majority of people would like to live good life, and we cannot shame them for this. So we must create good conditions for their living. Now the indicator of climate change, it has increased by 1 degree since the year 1880. Although it is only 1 degree, but anyway, this may result in the level of the sea going up. Then this will result in catastrophe to many countries, because main territories of many countries may become under the sea. And when the population in our planet is supposed to grow to 50 billion, and according to the focus of other countries, until 2050, more 265 million additional tons of protein must be somewhere got in order to provide food to all these 50 billion people. So somehow additional meat should be produced, and this is a challenge. Taking into consideration climate change challenge, the food problem will exacerbate. Those regions which are marked in green, they will be producers of foodstuff, and the countries in the red zone, they will really experience a very severe challenge. China will also be one of the largest consumers of food. As you can see, it is marked yellow. As concerns energy, they say, some experts say that coal goes and oil, fossil fuels consumption will decrease, but this is not so. They still will be used because there are not enough technologies for balancing and for using only green energy from green sources, from renewable sources. So the oil producing countries who can influence whole the world, as they did several days ago when they decided to reduce the oil production, and they can play very aggressively on the markets, places, world marketplaces, because they can create risky trends for the world's development as concerns environment. We can look at the Arctic. It is the ground, testing ground, and due to climate conditions, the ice there will be melting, and many countries are fighting for the Arctic territory. Because the countries who are present there, they are fighting. They have a competition in between, because production of various resources, mining them in Arctic is now relevant. That is why the countries are now in opposition. Then China can bring goods faster to Europe and other countries, and this will be a huge this will be very big for China. This will be very good, because this is one of the causes of this war, and this is also a practical issue. On this slide you can see what are the ways. You can see how China can work when the climate change issue is addressed. The next point is economy. The next item, you can see here all the world's countries, and our place is 59th. Our share is 0.1% in the world, and we cannot be satisfied with it. So this is because of the reality in which we live now. So if we not pay attention to our economy, then the question of returning those people who are displaced, who live now in other countries, they must have here in Ukraine good conditions, then they will come back. As concerned the other countries, there are many people who live in other countries, for example, the Southern Korea, Germany, China. We can see that despite they do not have pensions there, but they see that the number of old people are growing. This group of people is growing there. So there will be more working places, more jobs in Southern Korea, in Japan, in Southern Europe, Germany, China, but we are not talking about different jobs. People must be more educated. This is our focus. People must have better education, and they are not like it was before. There were people, there were people. I do not speak good Ukrainian because I am from Lugansk region. So talking about trade agreements, the World Trade Organization has almost penetrated all the world, but regional associations now are more important. This is how we think regional trade will be successful, not global. In recent years, the World Trade Organization will be not in the focus of attention. We can look at the state debt of some countries which are available. When COVID started in the world, then we talked with various embassies, and we believed that the Third World War started with COVID pandemic because nobody have answered us what was that? Was it natural or was it an artificial pandemic? This is very important to know because the congressmen in the USA, they have asked the intelligence service what happened, why the whole world was topsy-turvy because of this COVID pandemic. There was no country which remained unaffected. We can see the national debt growing in every country, and you can see here the situation until 2007, and then after the COVID pandemic, the countries started helping their populations, their citizens with welfare benefits. The politicians, they wanted people not to be affected by COVID related problems. And as of now, these countries are in red color. except Russia, because Russia has a lot of resources thanks to selling oil to the West. Later, I shall tell you why has it happened. What should we plan? We should understand our future trends, then we can plan. So we cannot invest in when the situation is fluctuating in the world now, because now there will be digital currencies, and digital money is the future of the entire world, and who will be managing this money? These processes are tried now, I would say so, because the civilized world cannot overlook these processes which are related to money. Before money were the element of exchange. They were the object of exchange for in remuneration for some services or works. But now money, for example, some football player can earn 100 million. So I cannot understand what a person must do so that this person costs so much. But then this money are unfair. They are not the object of exchange for some works performed. As concerns economic activity, it will continue in some parts of Asia, but it will be diminishing with time, and we also focus that in the nearest future, India and China will be going up to the first places. All the rest of the countries will not be growing. They will remain at the same level as they are today. The next thing we can expect is a technology development. Technologies will be various, and the hyperconnective world. Hyperconnectivity is our future. When information is disseminated very fast, it is now very fast already. It is disseminated online. There are many people of my age in this audience, and we remember that when we were young, when we were children, we could not imagine it would be so that some cars will be flying, that we will have TV set in our hands, and we can talk to some other country, not from the post office. Now this post office booth with a telephone set is in your pocket, so everything will be everything will look some other way. We will not be carrying our smartphones in our pockets, so we can expect this next 20-30 years. As concerns technology, there is a great fighting for brains. And those countries who have good living conditions, they can get the best stuff from any country without any conditions. In other countries, we must provide good conditions so that best workers come and work at our countries. As to technologies, as a cause of transformations, we should talk about the artificial intellect. I do not suppose that artificial intelligence will be good, because I don't like it. The situation in this which happened at Oleksiy Street shows that sometimes IT is used for manipulations, for falsifications. So there could be some processes in 10 or 15 years because we will have some computer sicknesses like COVID. I don't know how these pandemics will develop. It is hard to say now. Talking about biotechnology, biotechnology has been making contribution into economic growth, and I am a keyboard. I have changed my eyes, and it was at home. It took 5 to 6 hours. So biotechnologies are so that you can replace your eyes, you can replace your heart. Only your soul you cannot replace. As concerns space technologies, China will become the main competitor of the USA. As to hyper-connected world, internet will cover 64 billion objects until 2025, and the hyper-connected world will give speed for 1 million bits per second. Then the spheres which will be affected by transformations. The war in Ukraine showed the example of improved wars. So the wars becomes advanced ones. Then energy efficiency issue will be on agenda. There will be also social changes. This will be that reality which the society requires, and this will be mandatory because confidentiality issue will be a challenge, because the information will be hard to keep confidential. If someone wants to know your information, they will find how to get information about you. So the key trends which we can see today, that is the segmentation trend primarily. We should pay attention on this. Social media, messengers, they will be dominating now. They will be covering more and more vocations. Journalism will be diminishing, not because people do not want speaking to journalists, but because it is very easy for a person to read something in a messenger like Facebook. Is it really trusted information you cannot know, because you do not know who is the person hiding under that nick. We have talked about urbanization. I'd like to focus attention on religion and ethnicity. This is a mistake to think that religions will be not so much influential. No, this is not so. When life becomes more complicated, then people go to religious institutions. When their life is complex, there they can find simple answers. Europe will experience the fight with credits, a low growth of productivity, the aging of population. The digitalization now has just started, and after 15-30 years, the world will be different as it is now. It will be digitalized. You can see how many work people have, for example, to shoot some video with a camera. This will not be so in future. Your camera will look like some other way. And there are trends to conflicts. When transformation takes place, then conflicts are mandatory in any civilization. Very many conflicts appear in any any time of transformation. There are many institutions, they have already lost their influences. We can see the institution number one in the world, which is the United Nations, where Russia is the head of presidium, and the council in the UN Defense Council. This is a kind of very strange scene. So we can see that the entire world, in terms of global stability, all the world is covered with some territories which are unstable. So the situation, there are hot spots on the maps. Here are our regional focus. Where we are now, we can say that we forecasted what will be happening with the population, how the number of population will be growing, how the number of of internet users will be growing. And now you know that the United Nations have already adopted the decision that internet is the same mandatory essential resource for any person as water and air. The West have not recognized Ukraine as Europe before February 24th, 2022. So we were deemed Eurasia territory since 1990, when they decided that there is the USSR with the capital in Moscow. There are 3 Baltic states, and the rest of 12 countries should be given to Russia and live under Russian protectorate. But unfortunately, Russia, with their various forms of influence, so they were agreed with, and in 1994 the monopoly was adopted for nuclear weapon. Nuclear weapon was taken from Ukraine, from Kazakhstan, and only Russians now can manage nuclear weapon. And as Russians are bold, they use nuclear weapon as they like. So this is a mistake of Europe, that they want to make Russia democratic states. Asia and democracy, they do not cross in between. There must be no chauvinism, which is disseminated heavily all over Russia. I do not understand why Moldova is Eurasia, while when Moldova is in Europe. Belarus, Ukraine, and Moldova has no 1 square meter of Asian land. This is not Asia. And due to this huge Western mistakes, these were mistakes of Western countries' leaders, now we have this situation. But Ukraine has broken these trends as of now. There was no intelligence in any country who believed that we will be fighting. All intelligences saw that our country will stop existence very fast. But in our they only forecasted that they will have guerrilla in Rivne or Ternopil region, or maybe Zhytomyr region. Also, we tried to explain them that we are the nation, that we will be acting, and that the result will be opposite. They will be only smiling. They saw that we are crazy. So when this happened, they were shocked, and so far they have not recovered from this shock. So, talking about global trends, we should understand what will be with Russia. The West is afraid of Russia, and fragmentation of Russia will take place regardless of whether they want or not. The West believes that they can stop disintegration of Russia, but I'm sure that this process cannot be stopped, and Russia will be fragmented very fast. This will start from Caucasus, as it was always. But if Russia is not fragmented, then the issue of our resilience and life will be on our agenda and will be our continuous challenge. Nobody will be investing in the country which is in the area of risk, under risk. So we should be not dreamers. They are all pragmatic. Investors are pragmatic. And if the issue of Russia is not resolved, then all other matters will turn into challenges for Ukraine. I understood this after December 2019 when he met Putin, and then I understood that the matter of war was already resolved. So our society was to become resilient, get ready to the war. Our society is perfect. I understood this when in January our children in schools started singing this song in the flash mob, the Father our Bandera and Ukraine is our mother, and we shall go to the war, we shall go to the front line to fight for our motherland. Then I understood that our society is resilient. As concerns chant that new alliances and unions will be established. We think, yes, it will be so. But there is a project which we name Synergy. Ukraine must have security, must ensure security against Russia. You can see here those countries. The question is how fast it would happen after 10 years or 15 years, but this focus we can do. I can see that we do not have enough time, so you can see that sub-Saharan Africa, and that they show the best demography. They have very many reproductive age people. So and when this tree looks thin, then the age categories will be aging. So, as concerns the scenarios of the world's development, democracies will be restored. The second scenario is a fluctuating world under the influence of China. This is impossible. The third is a bipolar world as it was before. On the one hand, the USA, and on the other hand, on the other side is China. And we hope that they will be competing and fighting only on the markets, not just through the war. And this is the multipolar world. The USA, China, the EU, Russia. This is what Russia is dreaming about, where the world is fragmented into some territories under influence. The fifth scenario is tragedy and mobilization. We believe that the third scenario will be developing, will be realized. All the rest of them are very threatening, very dangerous for the world. So I have presented our analysis in brief. We have been continuously producing very huge research papers. We have one paper which we generated recently where our country should go now, how Russia will be developing, how it will look like. So we depend on what will be happening with Russia. If it does not disintegrate, it will be a challenge for Ukraine. Thank you for everyone who was listening our broadcast. And Andreas Umland has a question. Before that, there was one question from our online participants. Is it possible to get this presentation? Is it in public space? Is it accessible? In this presentation, I do not give any private information. I would like you to understand that if we do not interpret this or that page, is it correct? I cannot tell you now. I'd like to stress that all people whose work is paid by the state, and when this document is not deemed confidential, it can be public. So maybe we shall post it at our website for your use, because there is a recording, then we can say that it is already a public document. Thank you. I have a very practical question. It concerns many topics which you touched in your speech. The future migration policy of Ukraine. I have a certificate for living in Ukraine, but I know my colleagues from the EU who cannot get a permit for living in Ukraine. This is a challenge. The situation is paradoxal that with visa-free regime mode, everything was very easy. Ukraine launched visa-free regime for the EU, and then the EU launched the visa-free mode, and now the EU provided a long-term living permits for Ukraine, but Ukraine did not do that. Did not do the proportional step towards the EU. Maybe this would be very important for restoration of Ukraine. Diaspora has also a question about the double citizenship. As concerns double citizenship, we must address those people who have roots, fathers, grandfathers. They can have Ukrainian citizenship. As concerns those people who work in Ukraine, I am for those for double citizenship for people from diaspora who are real Ukrainians. Next question. Thank you very much, Mr. Danilov. I am Drechenko. I am a commissar of Anti-Corruption Assembly. You said that there is a problem with money will be in future. On the one hand, you said that Ukraine is a territory of risk and nobody will invest in Ukraine. So whether Ukraine in the next 10-15 years, how Ukraine will develop, when now many persons left Ukraine, we do not have enough people for working in Ukraine. I'd like to say that money has always been a substance which I cannot now tell you. I can tell you a case. For example, my mom is 91 years old. She has been working all her life so that she had a good pension of 120 rubles. So she could. So she had 132 rubles. And now there were many periods that they have passed, so the money have not been stable. They have never been stable. The money is not the means for saving. Digitalization, digital money will change very many things. I can say that now we take loans from IMF and other banks. Then first we lend money, first we borrow money, then we repay money. For someone, money is a means of saving. No, money is not a tool for saving. But I can say that devaluation of money, I can remember 1990s when during this time the prices for any goods like socks have changed dramatically. Denis Bogush, Association of Political Consultants, talking about the disintegration of Russia. I have been thinking of this issue. I have 10 scenarios how it would happen, and I have question to you. Do we understand that when it will be disintegrated, it may have nuclear weapons with different subjects at different territories of Russia? How Ukrainian specialists will be helping some republics with managing their life with law and order? Do we have a strategy on accompanying the disintegration of Russia? I like it when you see us so powerful that we will be accompanying the disintegration of Russia. Nuclear weapon is a challenge for the entire world, and we believe that they are big countries. We are not in their club. They must take care of this because some responsibility is vested with them for what is happening in the world. We have been removed from this pool of large countries. So when in 1990s Moscow was decided, was allowed to become this member of this large countries club, and this must be the problem to be addressed by the West. So they are now thinking what to do with nuclear weapon. They did not want the USSR to collapse. So they took weaponry from us, from Belarus and Kazakhstan. But now the process of disintegration continues, and at every our meeting we say that let us we will be helping you, we say to the Western experts, because we know them. They think that the intelligence experts knows everything, but they know nothing. When we underestimate ourselves, when we think that Western experts know everything, this is not so. We must assess ourselves better. The next question, Yaroslav Jalila, Institute of Strategic Research. You said that there is no political structure could forecast the resilience of Ukraine in this war. You have named many documents in your speech. Can you mention the focus from these documents which are incorrect as of today, but anyway some leading countries are using them, this incorrect focus? I do not want now you know that in every capital everyone is rewriting focus, taking into consideration what our country has performed, this brave rebuff which our country gave to Russia. So there are some people who are responsible. This is a large issue. Do you remember there was a case when the USSR was fighting with Germany? What was the main mistake? And now also the entire world experts are thinking how to redo their analysis, taking into consideration this focus. But I explained to them that we have the will to freedom. We live on different planets with Russians. And when Putin was saying about us, that we are brothers, that do you know that they are still visiting the mausoleum, looking at the corpse of Lenin, and they are saying that they are Christians. When a person is Christian, that Christian must bury his leaders. And if you are not Christian, then you are welcome to mausoleum to visit dead people. The question about Belarus, what are the perspectives? Shoigu said today that the nuclear weapon will not be brought there. Bloomberg agency said that nearly 280 billion of Russian oligarch money are hidden. And what can we do with this? As concerns the nuclear weaponry, this is a bluff of Russian Federation. They want to negotiate behind our backs. When it was in spring, when in Switzerland Biden met them, they want to have the same situation. They want to reach negotiations, so they do everything for this. And one of the instruments is a nuclear blackmailing. If Russia would bring any nuclear weapon to Belarus, its warheads. So Belarus is a colony of Russia. I think that they will be trying to go further with this situation about the nuclear warheads. I think that Macron said he will be visiting, but there will be no negotiations under our back, behind our back. When our people do not give agreement to any action, then I know. I was in Vilnius when Yanukovych decided not to sign agreement, not to sign policy of Euro integration. And there was Olga Gerasimuk, and she was crying. I asked her, why are you crying? Because you see what is happening. Classic case. Everything is lost. I said, no. This is only the start, and now you can see that Viktor Yanukovych fled from Ukraine. We have our people, and our people should be respected. And if someone in other countries thinks that our people's thought does not matter, this is a mistake. It must be considered. The Security Council of Ukraine some time ago was an initiator of the concept of security and how it will be implemented. The second question is the occupation of Crimean strategy, which you voiced out. Why you did that? I'd like us to understand that the Security Council is headed by the President of Ukraine. It consists of 22 persons who are assigned by the decree of the President. The new Minister of Strategic Industry Commission has been assigned as a member to the Security Council, and we work under the President, and by his instruction we draft documents. As concerns resilience, we produce these things, but this is very difficult to produce a sustainable document taking many volatile indicators into consideration. I would like to mention that the resilience includes morale. We experience a morale crisis, and until we stop this crisis, we can talk much, but this is a huge challenge. The crisis of morale in society must be addressed. As concerns Crimea, in Facebook, I wrote my private opinion, how I see the processes. But the journalist decided this is an official document. No, this is my opinion. We have been collecting the opinions from all the bodies saying how we will get Crimea back. And in the National Council, Defense and Security Council, we need to search for quorum for giving answers. Okay, do you have time? Oh, okay, we have more questions from online. Participant Natalia Lutsenko asked whether a nuclear state can disintegrate in general. As far as I understand, any atom can disintegrate. One they cannot disintegrate. I am a historian by my educational background. So, if we look into history, the world has been always changing. There has never been any stable borders, and the same concerns Russia. The larger you become, the faster you decay. And we also remember that the British Empire, the French Empire have disintegrated. The next question from Mikola Kuskiba. I don't know, can you answer it, or maybe this is not your competence. What the government plans so that Ukraine become attractive for migrants from other countries? Yes, the natural growth and population is question for our families. I have enough children in my private family, but in other families, this is your answer. So every institution must address the issues in its competence. When Blitz questions. China, one child, one family. Crimean Tatars, the 4 people will help Crimea. Oh, I think the 4 people is not enough. As comparing with 2013, when you said the typical example of Soviet propaganda was that the common growth is so and so. And when you mentioned 2013, when we stopped mentioning this 2013, when we all will be working, when our system of references will be the same. The government, the state has their tasks, objectives. Every person on this planet has some talent. This is what I believe. And the state must help this person to unlock his talent, unlock his potential. And what is happening now? This is the problem, because unlocking talents so that the person can realize himself, this will give much happiness to this person and to this state in general. When the person is in the wrong place, this person is unhappy himself, and the state has problems. As concerned this artificial intellect, not so long ago, after we talked, she showed me how she talked with this artificial intelligence. They do not know about you anything. They do not know your hobbies. They do not know what you like. But one lady asked her artificial intelligence bot what questions Andriy Kulikov will ask me, and no questions this bot really guessed right. So Thank you. What is the right word for bears? For bears in science? No, I don't remember. Oh, professional journalist. There are two more questions from online participants. You said that we know without me what was further. We know with you because you are a significant personality. What we do not know about you and about your role in these events. Let's say so. It it will be 5th of April tomorrow. This is 1 year from the time when our president took very important decision, but these events were very important for it is very easy to surrender, but we are rebuffing and we will win. This is the fact, proven fact, whatever Moscow wants. And the last question, my Lugan past. And tell us about our joint Lugansk future. For this, all people of Ukraine. Let's not demonize those people who live there now. What attitude we should have since 1994, since 1994 actively, their brains have been raped since that time. So this territory will be calm. In other territories, I think the situations will be not so calm as in Lugansk and Donetsk. Those people who do not know what is happening there and they say that they are all demons, this is not so. Everything will be simpler. They just want to have jobs and they want to live in peace. That's all. All the questions about language and others, they were absolutely artificial and had nothing to do with what was happening there. When I lived at my neighboring Krasny Luch town, I remember all these Ukrainian national songs, dances, clothing, and when in my childhood, but after 1972, when Sherbitsky came to reign, after 1972, it started. Moscow started actively installing Moscow ideology in Ukraine. And until Moldova will become united, and the same concerns Georgia, Belarus, it will be difficult for Ukraine when our neighbors are not democratic. For us, will be very difficult to address our own issues. So in 1979, there was Lukyan at the head of the Верховна Rada of the USSR. He was the ideologist of imposing this Moscow policy in Ukraine. Yes, it was Lukyanov. This was his concept. Mr. Danilov, I would like to thank you, but before that, one person decided not to ask you. She just wanted to give you this letter. This is a letter for you. We are thanking you with our applause. Thank you very much. According to our agenda, we were to have a break, but I think we will have only 3 minutes break because we need 2 more chairs. So 3 minutes for bringing chairs and inviting our participants. And now we shall have our second part of panel discussion with the participation of Fiona Gill, Senior Fellow in the Center on the United States and Europe in the Foreign Policy Program at the Brookings Institution, Andreas Umland, Analyst, Stockholm Center for Eastern European Studies, Swedish Institute of International Affairs, and also Vadym Denysenko from Ukrainian Institute for the Future, but we do not see him here yet. He is not here, I think.
Просто ми у Фіони можна спитати, що зараз план Умланд, коли ми зробити, і можна реально з ним цікаво.
Так, шановні панове Денисенко і Умланд, прошу вас на сцену. Пане Вадиме Ігоровичу, як я, так, Ігорович? Я добре запам'ятав з минулого разу. Проходь, будь ласка, проходь.
So, we invite Mr. Denisenko, Mr. Umland to take their seats at the stage. You should be in the center. Dear colleagues, please take your seats and use your ears again, not your mouths. Our break is over. It was only 3 minutes break. And the one who won't talking, please do this outside of our hall. So, the panel discussion, War for Survival, Challenges and Opportunities for Ukraine, and the participants in this war. Vadym Denysenko, Executive Director of the Ukrainian Institute of the Future, and Andreas Umland, Analyst, Stockholm Center for Eastern European Studies, Swedish Institute of International Affairs. And if someone does not know Andreas Umland, now we know him because he has already asked a question to Mr. Danilov. And Fiona Gill will join us from online. She is a senior fellow in the Center on the United States and Europe in the Foreign Policy Program at the Brookings Institution. So we shall be studying the following issues, the prospects of international positioning of Ukraine, and strategic resilience of the Ukrainian state through the prism of global trends and world development, and survival strategy for Ukraine's economy in the context of external threats. For the very beginning, I would like to ask Ms. Fiona and other two panelists within 1 minute to give a statement about these three issues. The first is strategies for survival for the Ukrainian economy. The second is mechanisms to support Kiev, how and future security of Ukraine. And the third is resilience of the Ukrainian state. Then you can talk more. Fiona Gill, the floor is yours, please.
Here.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. Thank you very much. I will, as promised, keep this brief, and I would like to just lay out, as part of an introduction, the fact that all three of the questions that you've posed about the future of the Ukrainian economy, its global perspective and its future security and resilience are really all tied up with how Ukraine can present itself internationally. And I want to just lay out one major problem that I think needs to be addressed and that we have to think about a year after the beginning of Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine, with Ukraine's position in the rest of the world internationally. And I hope I'm speaking slowly enough for the interpretation, because coming originally from England, I tend to speak very fast. So I hope that the interpreters are okay with the speed I'm speaking. But I think that one of the problems that Ukraine is facing now, I'm actually sitting in Berlin at the moment, where I've been for a month on a fellowship, and I have been taking part in a lot of meetings and discussions, not just with Germans, but with people from all around the world on Zooms like this, is that the war in Ukraine is not seen in the frame that we're all discussing it. It's not seen in the terms of Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine. And I've been having meetings with Brazilians and Israelis and South Africans and Indians and many others in this time frame. But it's actually seen as a proxy war, and not actually entirely as we would think either, as a proxy war between the United States and the West and Russia, but increasingly between the United States and China. And this has been something that has surprised me, but it came out very clearly in some recent discussions that I and other colleagues have been taking part in. And in many respects, attitudes around the world are really shaped by attitudes towards the United States rather than Ukraine. And I think that is going to be a huge problem for Ukraine in terms of its longer-term international perspective. And I know that many in the Ukrainian government are aware of this, but I think the challenge is how to address it. What I'm finding more and more, and indeed hearing from directly colleagues in what people call the Global South, that the war is now seen as the first war in the competition between the United States and China, because Russia, as a result of the war, is becoming more dependent in China over time, and how China presents itself and how China behaves is going to be decisive for the future. So Ukraine's relationship with China and with other countries is very much affected by these perceptions. And what we're seeing increasingly is anti-Americanism, fatigue with the United States, disillusionment with the role of the United States as global hegemon, is affecting how many countries think about Ukraine. So, for example, in the Middle East and Asia and Latin and South America, many countries are seeing everything about the war in Ukraine and Russia's actions in Ukraine as framed by their views about the United States and about NATO, And of course, today is the day that Finland formally becomes part of NATO. And obviously, Russian propaganda has had a major impact on this. But increasingly, there's a sense that most countries don't want to take sides. They want to stay out of the whole conflict. They accept that the invasion by Russia of Ukraine was wrong, but they don't want to have any pressure put on them to take sides. They resent the application of sanctions by the United States and by Europe on Russia and on them by extension. And right now, there's a lot of waiting in other parts of the world to see really what happens here. And of course, we've also heard today that Saudi Arabia has decided to reduce oil production and in many respects to side with China and Russia on the future of energy prices. Countries like South Africa are reviving their Cold War ties to Russia and taking a stance against anti-US imperialism. The ANC are visiting Russia, for example. And India, as well as Brazil, are very concerned about what impact this war is going to have on their relationships with China and Russia. And many countries are worried about the discussions in Ukraine and elsewhere about the future of Russia and Russia being taken out of the international system as a counterweight toward the United States. So I'll stop there, but I just want to put that out there, and perhaps Andreas might want to comment on this as well, because he's sitting in a very similar position to me and probably hearing some of these same things. But one of the biggest challenges for Ukraine for its future is changing this narrative and actually decoupling Ukraine from all of the negative perceptions about the United States internationally.
Thank you very much for bringing us this perspective. Так. Що? Питання у нас треба, ми послухаємо зараз, Фіона залишається з нами, ми послухаємо Андреаса Умланда, потім Вадима Денисенка, і будуть питання. Будь ласка, Андреас.
Я, може, потім повернусь до цього питання.
I shall return to the image of Ukraine issue, but I will start with the other topic. The external political situation in Ukraine as I can see it. I shall not give my advice, but I will give my opinion. This is a descriptive opinion, descriptive analysis. What is now and what will be in future, not what the USA must do, no. The external policy, the foreign policy was multivectoral. It had been before 2014. It was a kind of zigzag policy. And after 2014, it was a one-vector policy to the West, towards the West, and now our policy is eclectic. The security and foreign situation sees the one vector remaining, the West vector remains in place, and Ukraine has got the status of the candidate to the EU membership, but I'm afraid that this Western integration for Ukraine has become more complicated, at least as concerned the accession to NATO, because this war, it must motivate Ukraine to join NATO, but as far as I see, unfortunately, the West is affected negatively now. They do not want to accept Ukraine. the 31 countries, all of them, they have a veto right. So the situation has become more complicated, more challenging, and I think that the foreign political situation in Ukraine is eclectic. We have special relationship with the United States, and the philosophy that Ukraine must become a kind of Israel in Europe, and we have bilateral special relations with the Great Britain, with Poland, with Canada, and the trilateral relationships with some countries. And in the future, there may be new formats will be developed. We can see only trends. That they will appear, and there will be some England-Saxon policies where in some alliances the USA, Canada, Great Britain will act together. Then there will be also Nordic vector where we can see now that there is a general position among the Nordic countries, and I also suppose there will be an Asian vector in global policy, because Russia and China are supposed to become an alliance. If China supply weaponry to Russia, then Ukraine must enter into some unions with Japan, Taiwan, and I think there will be many vectors, the Black Sea vector as well, and there will be various directions, lines in which Ukraine will try to get some security guarantees and military support. As for me, the more interesting issue will be after several years, where Ukraine in this year will start negotiations as to Ukraine's accession to the European Union, and I suppose that after 4 or 5 years, Ukraine really may access the European Union. Then the interesting issue about the Article 42 of Lisbon Treaty will start working, where the EU is also a defensive alliance. It is also about security, and there is certain potential which are similar to Washington Agreement, Article 5, and whether all 27 European Union member states are ready also to include this article into accession of Ukraine at the moment of accession of Ukraine in future. Against this background, it will be important for the USA. If the USA is not ready to give security guarantees to Ukraine, similar to those given to the Southern Korea, if the USA can give this guarantees, this kind of guarantees, then it seems to me, and it is interesting what Fiona thinks about this, the strategy will be most useful to support the Eastern European countries which are members of NATO, and such as Poland, Slovakia, and other European countries, 10 countries, who supported Ukrainian application to NATO. So I think the picture looks like this, and I suppose it is eclectic. There will be no one way, no single way. There could be various ways how to enter into security guarantees or unions or alliances. And now 7 minutes for one speech. Vadym Denysenko, he is the executive director of the Ukrainian Institute of the Future. I will not be speaking about the external policy. I will be talking about domestic challenges we can expect and for which we do not have answers as of the moment. And nobody is looking for the answers. This is a pity. It's a pity. So what we want to go the way of least resistance, and we do not want to understand that this is also a crime before the next generations and before the state of Ukraine. The key problem which we should negotiate, discuss at any debate is how this country will look like in future. We must imagine how it will look like. We must reshape it. We must imagine and reimagine the whole range of regions of Ukraine. For example, in Chernihiv, only 70% of people have returned, and in Cherkasy now there are 130% of population as compared to the beginning of February 2022. We should reimagine our Ukraine, but we went the other way. We decided that Ukraine needs 700 billion, and then happiness will start. But I think that we will not be capable to use all this money. This will be only stolen money, I think. We continue thinking with categories we must build 100 hospitals, 200 kindergartens, but our global challenge now is that we do not want to start discussions in this country how Ukraine must look like. De facto, we just want to restore Ukraine of in the same shape as it was in 1991. The next is the problem of potential authoritarian regime which we may have in Ukraine. We seem to roll down into authoritarian power. Our central power must remember that there are regions, they exist, and there are very many other things which balance the power. So theoretical authoritarianship, which is possible, is also problem number 2. The problem number 3 is the threat that we may fail to remove all pro-Russian forces from Ukraine. And we can see this in our churches. When we have this Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine, and where many religious people under the influence of this Russian agents who work in these churches. So the pro-Russian bureaucrats or priests, they are afraid of Moscow more than of Ukraine. And until the situation is so, until they are not afraid of Ukraine, then we are not clean from pro-Russian forces. The next issue, we must imagine, we must start thinking over how this country will look like in 2050. When we do so, then we know where to go. And the fifth challenge we face is that for the next years will be subsidized heavily. This is reality. The subsidized states suppose that we will have sponsors in the next years. Then we come to the most important, largest problem, that we do not have agreements between allies about the basic principles for the next years. So the allies must agree what processes will be essential and not changeable. If this is not in place, as we know from Ukrainian history or other nations' history, allies can be very easily bought or manipulated with money. And the next, look at this table, please. Talking about the international affairs, we have the situation, this is our model of theoretical future of Ukraine. What basic scenarios we can expect? On one of the axes, we see that this is stable world. On the other pole, we see chaos and regionalization, fragmentation of Ukraine. Green scenario is Ukraine is a nation, has nationhood, and the red is Ukraine without nationhood. So 25%, this is Chernobyl scenario where we are not subject, we are not nationhood, we are not state in the reintegrated world. Then the first scenario, stable world where Ukraine is a subject, Ukraine is a nationhood. The most optimistic for us, but stability in the world in the next 10 years cannot be expected. Then scenario number 3, Medoid, it is the regionalization of Ukraine. So we should go towards these positive scenarios, but first we must answer the first 5 questions which I have mentioned today. Thank you. Now, question from Volodymyr Lupatsiy to Fiona Gill. Thank you. Fiona said that we should change narrative as to assessment of Ukrainian-Russian war, that this is not the fighting between democracy and autocracy or between the USA and China? What of these three factors is most important for changing this narrative which you mentioned? Is this economic issue? Is it a question of stimulus? Or is it a diplomacy, international diplomacy issue and consolidated position between the USA and other partners? Or it is an domestic political consensus in the USA issue? What Ukraine can do but has not done in this issue, in changing the narrative in the world? Yes, now the floor is yours, Fiona.
Very much. I think this is a very important question, and it relates to the issues that both Andreas and Vadym have also laid out here. As Vadym was saying in his presentation, that Ukraine will really need sponsors and subsidization for some period of time to move forward because of the war. And I would say, in line with what Andreas was laying out, which are the realities of Ukraine's location and current set of relationships, that it won't be sufficient to find those in Europe. Where I'm sitting right now in Germany, there's a huge debate going on in Germany, not just about Ukraine, obviously, and Andreas and Vadym, I know this quite well, but about Germany's own economic future, because of the economic shifts that are taking place, climate change, digitalization, global shifts, and Germany's own resilience and ability to shift and adapt politically and economically. Germany's trying to move away from coal production, not just coal imports from Russia or from other places, but domestic coal production by 2030, which is in a very short period of time, 5-6 years, which is the same time frame as Andreas was laying out, that Ukraine would want to see itself as part of Europe. And with Brexit and the exodus of the United Kingdom from Europe, the biggest donor country is Germany. But Germany's having, as I said here, a great deal of discussions itself about how to fund its own transformation and transitions, which was going on before Russia's invasion. Now, Germany's views of Russia have plummeted. There's very negative views of Russia here now and increasingly positive views about Ukraine, but there's a great deal of concern about Germany's economic future and Germany's political future. And that also is reflected in many other European countries as well. So what Ukraine will have to look for in terms of sponsors that Vadym was talking about, and the impetus for economic development that everyone has been talking about, is to the rest of the world as well. It won't only just be within Europe or the vector of joining the European Union. Ukraine will need to trade and have partnerships with as many countries as possible globally, especially given the importance of the agricultural sector in Ukraine. And we're already seeing some questions about the future of the common agricultural policy in Europe as a result of this. France obviously is a major recipient of subsidies in agriculture, so is Italy and Spain. Bulgaria, Romania, and some of the countries closer to Ukraine are also asking questions. And Ukraine's food production is vital for the whole world, not just for Europe and for immediate neighbours. So I think there's going to be some major challenges on food and food security, which actually gives Ukraine an opportunity to talk to as many countries as possible. And I know that the Ukrainian government is already thinking about how to talk to the African Union, how to talk to Asian countries, and how to expand out this vector. Fertilizer, another major issue for Ukraine. Brazil has previously been dependent on fertilizer for 10% of its production from Russia, but Ukraine has important relationships in that regard. So I think the answer to the question is really looking at the complexity of Ukraine's own future development, as Vadym said, rethinking Ukraine, what Ukraine is going to look like in the future, internally as well as regionally, in all the linkages that it will have in Europe and globally, but also then framing diplomacy in that regard. Andreas is right that Ukraine will have to have a multi-vector diplomacy, but it's not just going to have to be within a Europe and a kind of broader European sphere. Ukraine is so vitally important in terms of food production and manufacturing as it had been previously, that this will have to be in a more global context. So this will put a lot of emphasis on Ukraine's diplomatic development and the partnerships that it can develop to assist it in that regard. And the US may not be, I would say, the best partner for those future set of relationships for Ukraine. Other European countries, perhaps Japan, South Korea, and other countries, Canada, for example, may be more helpful for Ukraine over the longer term with that kind of larger diplomatic effort.
Thank you so much. І зараз заключні ремарки від Андреаса Умланда.
Now the last remarks from Andreas Umland, and then there will be one question to Miss Fiona. If possible, I would like to speak English.
The issue about the image.
Фіона сказала, що в США є певні наративи, є певні зміна дискусії, у такий дискурс, коли опозиція між Заходом і іншими країнами, що це ніби війна між Західом та іншими країнами, що це боротьба за свободу, за європейську ідентичність, але я думаю, що це не найкращий дискурс, який ми можемо використати. Що ми можемо зробити, це поговорити про безпеку та міжнародний порядок, люди, які ми підтримуємо в ім'я демократії України, але також в ім'я демократії ми бомбили Сербію, Лівію та Ірак, або не ми, а інші, але ж робили в ім'я демократії. І у чому специфіка цього вторгнення в Україну? Це війна з анексією, не просто агресія, це агресія і війна, щоб розширити територію Росії. Не лише проти України, але й про українську державності, українського народу. Сербія і Лівія. В Україні не було війни до того, як Росія не вторглася до неї. Як ці дискурси, як подолати? Українці так борються за демократію, ми всі цим пишаємося, але як зробити так, щоб у іншому світі краще розуміли, про що відбувається?
It is really about the fate of the internet. somebody will say нравится, не нравится, Indonesia расширяется. Yeah? So other countries could have then the same sort of discourses that Russia has today, and then simply say we don't accept the borders anymore. So if we can somehow get to that, I think then we can build a different discourse and get away from this the West versus the rest just juxtaposition.
Thank you very much. A question from Oleksiy.
Добрий день, я дуже радий, що
I am glad that Miss Fiona joined us today. The question is, this is general discourse that the Western world support the victory of Ukraine, but to some extent, until some cap. In this situation, it's like a bit pregnant, not completely. I'm reading foreign affairs and journals, and we can see there that the experts in the West are afraid of disintegration of Russia. This is typical for the USA, but not all the US politicians think so, but this is a domineering position. Considering the disintegration of the USA, nobody expected that, and when it collapsed, nobody knew what to do. Any victory of Ukraine will be risky. Not just disintegration of Russia, but other risks, and the USA in any victory will experience these risks, and all the world will. And like Kissinger said in Realpolitik, that maybe in some groups in the USA they can develop some risk scenarios, how to work with risks.
And I could hear you talking. I could see you talking, and I didn't realise I was supposed to talk. So I'm sorry. I think I understood the question, and I want to just again give some perspective on other discussions that are not just happening in the United States. I always think that we spend too much time often talking about the United States, and as a result it causes some of the problems that Andreas was talking about, that everything becomes framed in the United States norms and the United States dominates the narrative. And that's, I think, becoming the problem, as Andreas was saying, for Ukraine, and also Vadym saying about Ukraine has to think for itself about where it's going and what it's going to look like in the future. But I would say to the person who asked the question, that there's a lot of other countries that are worried about the idea of Russia being weakened rather than disintegrating. I would say that what's more likely to happen as a result of what Russia's been doing is the kind of Russia that we saw in the 1990s, which is a weakened central state, a lot of things going on in various regions, perhaps more of the secessionist movement in Chechnya. Again, I don't know whether Andreas or Vadym others, would agree with this, but a kind of a weakened central state and a lot more chaos of the kind that we saw in the 1990s. It's hard to envisage how other parts of the Russian Federation would break away. Chechnya, I think, would be another likely candidate. But places like Bashkortostan, Tatarstan, Udmurtia, you name the other places, they're kind of stuck where they are. And a lot of countries around Russia and part of the BRICS, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, they want to continue to see Russia as a counterweight in international affairs. I mean, we've heard that. I've heard it from the Israelis, for example, as well, because of their fears about what would then happen in Syria and with Iran, for example. And just recently here in Brazil, in Berlin rather, apart from discussing with Brazilians about their view about Russia as a counterweight to the United States, I've also heard from counterparts from Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan who are supportive of Ukraine in a general sense and very worried about what's happening to Ukraine, but they also don't want to see Russia completely weakened or disintegrated because of their reliance on Russia and the Russian economy and trade. You've still got 30% of the Tajik and Kyrgyz economies, roughly, dependent on remittances from the Russian Federation and no alternatives. Even though they would like to see this resolved and they would like to have Ukraine whole, free, and moving forward and have relationships with Ukraine, they're very nervous about this whole feature and about their own stakes in Russia. So that's something else that Ukraine has to contend with as well. You have to think about, it's not just Moldova, Belarus and the Belarusian opposition, or Kazakhstan being nervous that they might be next territorially, for example, but it's the Tajiks and the Kyrgyz and others who are dependent on Russia that worry about this in different ways. And I've been struck by how many different countries look at this, at the conflict through these very different lenses from their own perspectives. And Ukraine has to find a way through its diplomacy of engaging with that. And Ukraine has a lot to offer for other countries in the future, as Vadym, is suggesting. If Ukraine can provide an image of how it's moving forward in terms of economy, food, trade, manufacturing, for example, the digital space, Ukraine is an asset and could be an asset for other countries as it has been before. Education as well, for example.
Thank you very much. Ну і тепер буде і справедливо, і логічно на
Thank you. So we will give the floor to Vadym Denysenko, as Miss Fiona mentioned him in her answer. So what you can comment? And I have a question to Mr. Vadym. When you say that the Ukrainian flag should be of Sebastopol, are we ready to the new name of Sebastopol Akyar? Oh, when we have our flag over Sevastopol, then there will be does not matter what will be the name. I know that the Yevpatoria will not be called Kozlov because Kozlov was the name Russians gave it in 19th century, but it will not be its name. So, as to disintegration of Russian Federation, I would like to comment on this. If we talk about the situation as it is now, we cannot say that there are any separatist movements in the territory of Russia now. Of course, we like it to discuss how Tatarstan will disintegrate from Russia, but if we ask a question about the single national exam at the end of school in Tatar language in Tatarstan, only one person passed this exam in Tatar language. All other Tatar people speak Russian. So talking about the state institutions, we have no institute in Ukraine which address Russia. We need people who will be experts in Russia, so that these people, like their thesis in Russia, how can we discuss disintegration of Russia? We must research Russia first. We must know what is in reality happening in Russia. If we know this, we would dispel many of myths which are in our heads now. So I do not expect separatism in Russia. What are you talking about? Are you talking about separatism or independence movements? Yes, movements for independence, but this is only a term. They have no movements for independence. They have no separatist movements as well. And there is another comment. You're welcome. Please, I'd like to answer to what Vadym said before about the country. I am the EU citizen, and for me, all these scenarios, they look more optimistic. Because if this year the process of Ukraine's accession to the EU starts, then all problems which Vadym talks about, they will become a part of problems of the European Union. Because in the European institutions they are already speaking about what they are talking about Moldova, about Georgia, that Moldova and Georgia will have other processes of accession. Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, and maybe other countries, maybe Balkan countries, they will access with various formats, various agreements, step by step. This will be step-by-step integration, and Ukrainian territory will become the EU territory. And if it happens so, if it works, and Ukraine will demonstrate authoritarian trends, then Ukraine will have problems, will face problems, will have the image like that of Hungary, when Hungary does not comply with Copenhagen criteria. For accession to the European Union, our country should have the same political system. So Hungary is a double problem of Ukraine. It is anti-Ukrainian on the one hand, but on the other hand, for the Western Europe, they look at Hungary and they say Hungary was pro-European, pro-Western, and Orban was pro-Western. He was a Soros scholarship, had scholarship from Soros. And what happened now? And we now will give accession to Ukraine, and they can change and they can become a problem in future. So on one hand, I am more optimistic. I think that the accession process will start and we will have more money. We will have then funding from the European Union. We will have subsidies from the European Union. But many countries get subsidies, like Hungary. Without European subsidies, Hungary is nothing. Hungary would face a lot of problems without this funding. So, I am optimistic. Thank you very much. And the final remarks from Miss Fiona. Please take consideration of one question from Yulia Tishchenko. Western politicians say only about support to some extent to Ukraine. They are afraid of the Ukraine's failure. And your final remarks, please.
support. And I think that, particularly from where I sit, I see an awful lot of support for Ukraine. That people want Ukraine to succeed on the battlefield and over the longer term. And as Andreas is saying, there is now a realisation, a recognition that perhaps there wasn't after 2014 and the annexation of Crimea, that Ukraine is fully part of Europe. So there's an embrace of Ukraine as part of Europe. I think a lot of the hesitation that people may be sensing is because people are very worried about their own domestic political situations. Because there's a lot of a sort of sense of economic crisis in Western countries writ large that has been revealed in part by the war and the reactions to the war. The increase of food prices and energy prices and inflation. We've had some bank failures, for example, recently. And many countries are still grappling with their own problems with inequality and lack of regional development. Vadym was talking about that in the Ukrainian context, but you have to remember that other countries are going through those kind of painful discussions as well. And I think whatever future Ukraine is going to have in Europe is going to be part of these broader discussions about the future of Europe as well. So Ukraine's future, the future of Europe, the future of European economy and current political structures will be getting worked out as well. Vadym said, we can't turn the clock back to 1991, we can't perhaps turn the clock back to 2021 or other periods that we might pick. We're always going to have to be looking forward. And I think Europe's going to look very different as well. It won't be the same European Union. It already isn't because the United Kingdom has left. And I think Europe, the Europe that we're talking about in 5 to 6 years will be a very different Europe. But I think Ukraine will grow and develop along with it. And we have to be ready for that and be adaptable, as all of you are suggesting here, and have some plans.
Thank you very much. І те, що сказала наприкінці Fiona Gill, дає мені повну підставу сказати, що
What Miss Fiona told us that the final is very important, and now Mr. Vadym Denysenko will give his remarks. In brief, the first, we spoke in our first part of panel that the world is afraid that Russia will disintegrate. I do not like historical analogies, but in 1991, George Bush did not want Ukraine to leave the USSR. But then the USA was among first of 5 who recognized Ukraine's independence. So in optimistic terms, even if Russia disintegrates, then after 5 minutes, the world start adapting to this new reality and thinking how to manage all these disintegrated small states. So our discussion showed that the external challenges to Ukraine, which Ukraine is in the face, this gives us the reasons to think maybe Ukraine is also a challenge the world is facing for this year and many next years. So what we heard from the participants, that despite of the lack of one center who research, for example, Russia or some other countries, we have research think tanks and analytics and national platform of cohesion and resilience and social cohesion who will produce these results. When can we see these outcomes? I think this would be the 28th August 2023, because the probability is the same, like the probability of all forecasts we have heard today. Of course, this does not cancel the fact that these people and Oleksiy Danilov, who was the participant today in the first part of our meeting, he was invited then later to the governmental top authorities, but the fact that these experts and the officials like Mr. Danilov, that they are ready to share their opinions and their official positions, this is very important, because when a person does not want to speak, does not want to declare, this is quite another situation. So I'm thankful to Vadym for his story about the town of Kozlov, and I would like to remind you that the topic of our event was Ukrainian the fail of extender challenges, and it was organized by the National Platform for Resilience and Social Cohesion. And thank you very much for your attention. A peaceful time and day and night, and Ukraine will win.